Good morning, everyone. Wasn't that a fun song? That is Possibility of Positivity by Minky Britz. She's a South American or South African artist. And I just love it. I love the kind of ukulele sound, and it just seemed like a good vibe going into a Monday. Welcome. We are glad you're here. If you have not seen me before, my name is Katie Gideon, and I am dialing in from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I will be the on-camera facilitator for today's social, but I want to give a huge shout out to my co-facilitator who you will see in the chat and coming on screen, lovely Jen K up north, holding down the fort up there. But we are glad that you're joining us. I always feel like a little bit of an intruder on the Monday morning socials, even though I feel like recently I've been doing quite a few of them, just because this was so iconic, Jennifer O and Jen K events. But I still love to join all of you guys, especially on a lovely Monday morning. It's a little cloudy here, but that's okay. I am really looking forward to setting up our journals together. I'm seeing a lot of our returning socialers. Welcome. It is always great to see each and every one of you because you are the best accountability buddies that we all have. But if you happen to be new, welcome. We are glad that you're here as well. And we just want to remind you that you can participate in as much or as little of this social as you want. And the participation can take on very different ways. If you want to participate in the chat, just make sure it's set to everyone. That goes to the larger Sonder fam that's in the chat now. If it defaults, unfortunately, to hosts and panelists, which comes just to myself and Jen, and that is perfectly fine. We love to have conversations there, but we assume that you want other people's perspectives by instead of just ours. And then we do say it's a little bit of an inundation of the senses because you're going to want to sit and work on your journal. You may want to sit and just look at the slides and get some inspiration. If the music gets too much, you can mute it. If I get too much, you can mute me. And if you ever want to go back and see any of the other socials or some of the other weekly setups that are hosted by some of the other facilitators, don't forget you can check out our YouTube channel, which that'll be included at the end of the social, just so you can catch up on those if you need to. But as we say, you can journal in any way, shape, or form that you want. If you're here just for the chat and the community, we love that. If you're here to just work on your journal, we love that as well. We're just glad that you have signed up and set this time aside for you on whatever self-care journey you are on. And just going through those community guidelines, be kind and courteous to yourself and others. No promotions or spam. Respect everyone's privacy. No hate speech or bullying. We always ask to limit repetitive product and accessory questions, but we do like to talk about our products. And we know that you all are working on some really great things outside of Silk and Sonder as well. We just ask that it's kept to a minimum and not to detract from why we're here, which is the setup. And then, as always, we will redirect a lot of those individual customer care inquiries to our team, hello@silkandsonder.com. But this is also a great time to reach out to hello@silkandsonder.com if you have any suggestions or thoughts or feedback. We read all of that. I just always say that there's a time scale associated with some of these, so a lot of this stuff is planned pretty far in advance, but we're always willing to listen and provide new features or new updates because I think if you all are aware, Meha is always working on something new or different or additional. So we love that we get a lot of that feedback from all of you. And then Sonder Socials are a tool to help elevate your emotional health through the power of community, but you are responsible for your own emotions, well-being, and decisions. So if you've had a bad day, if you woke up a little bit on the wrong side of the bed today, that is fine. We don't want this to be triggering, and definitely give yourself a little bit of grace. Even as I said, I'm a little bit scattered because I just made a pretty big move across countries. So my brain and my emotions and mentality just don't match with like where I physically am at, and that's okay. But I've kind of struggled with a lot of the mind map questions. I haven't been able to get them done as quickly as I would say I usually do. But I'm giving myself some grace, being a little patient with that because I eventually come back to it. But it's just those type of things. If you need to set up some of those mental boundaries, mental barriers, please don't beat yourself up. It's not what it's here to do. It's here to help and be another tool in your toolbox. So, we are still talking about awareness. And I love this theme in the sense of I love that it is an alliteration with the month. I love April awareness, and I'm one of those that fixates on the alliteration component. So I just already love it, even though I am finding awareness a little bit challenging just to connect to, because I think it sounds so fun because it's the same letter. And I love that trick, and I do keep it handy, especially during the kind of lower seasonal depression times. I use those tools to kind of trick myself into feeling better, getting more excited about something because I was like, isn't it fun to say? And so I wanted to lean a little bit into we do such a great job, and I think some of our other facilitators do such a great job of really identifying that mental and physical connection. I'm just struggling with that right now. But I wanted to bring up these two quotes, which awareness precedes change. And to me, it was leaning a little bit into situational awareness, which I have a military background. So situational awareness obviously has very different ideas when it comes to that. But I also treat it a little bit as like the spidey senses that we have. It's almost a little bit of that intuition that we trust. But I also think it becomes one of those things that we don't give enough credit for is that, if you think back to maybe a friendship or a relationship that started to sour, you could probably pinpoint some of those early signs. And I think some of that is, keen to being situationally aware where it's like, I may not be able to do anything right now, but I'm starting to see some of those things in the peripherals. And I think also in terms of, I hadn't been driving a car in like a year. So now that I'm back driving again, it's exciting. I've been doing it for ages, but I almost have that more heightened sense of situational awareness. And I think that's more of the like, I'm having to change that habit and that skill set, one of being on a different side of the road, but also being in charge of the driving again. So that's why I think it's very important. And then I also think that situational awareness component leads into, I feel like the thrive and survive component that we always talk to, but it's that awake versus aware. And so being awake means how aware you are in all that you do. You may be alive, but that does not mean you are awake. And I think, yeah, it was Bailey in yesterday's social kind of brought it up. She was like, oh, there's definitely times in the morning I am awake, but I am unawares. And so I think it's also connecting that. And I even am certainly a huge, I don't always connect my days together with just the mentality. I'm always, elsewhere in that idea. So building that more mental awareness, situational awareness, I think can be really helpful. And I think it's again another framing of it because, like I said, I appreciate the thrive and survive component, but sometimes for me that gets a little too heavy and a little deep. Whereas I do think there's something a little bit lighter about the awake and aware. And so sometimes I feel like maybe that's the best step to start tackling some of those changes because it's not as heavy. But like I said, I found the situational awareness something that I was going to kind of continue to look at and try to connect with the overall theme. But if you would like to share in the chat kind of maybe your thoughts on awareness, we love to see that. Or has it changed in the, as we move into week 2 of April? Always like to get that insight for how each of you are connecting to the theme. So this is going to be our agenda for the day. We're going to tackle that week 2 mind map question. Then we're going to do our rosebud thorn reflection and then work on those weekly setup pages. And so first off, that awareness mind map. This is one of those that are unique to the weekly setups and it's not printed in your journal. And so as we are on week 2, go ahead and find that page that you already made your mind map for. A lot of people maybe will use the back page or that first blank note page, but you can obviously put it in the weekly scratch pad, the definition page, the quote page, or even just on a sticky note or repurpose one of the weekly page settings as you kind of work through. We just love the idea that you can personalize and customize this type of idea, especially if you maybe already know that you're going to be out one of the weeks, because don't treat this as homework. These are just opportunities for us to peel back a new layer of the theme to see what's underneath. And so we always include the previous weeks if you want to kind of see where that is and maybe adjust that. But this particular week, so week one, we did the really great sensory grounding exercise, which I highly recommend just as a good kind of starting point to connecting with yourself. And that's tapping into those five senses. I know it's also a great tool for anxiety attacks or even some of those on the autism spectrum, just to kind of connect and build those just kind of back into the present. And so now we move into week two, which is that mind body reflection, which I thought really worked well with the situational awareness idea. Because think about the last time you felt stressed or anxious. Did it cause any emotions or physical sensations? The next time you feel stress building, what is something you can do to care for yourself? So I took those exact questions and included them on this slide as well. And so the first three are from that. But then I also wanted to add a few more questions that I felt helpful for me in kind of exploring this idea. And it was, do you notice if it is more of a physical response or more of a mentality for you when it comes to stress? And I think everyone kind of fits into one of those. Are you ones that get really loud, that you snap quickly? Or is it more like you start being really negative? Do you start kind of beating yourself up a little bit more? Do you just not able to find the joy when you're a little bit stressed? And then what I also like to take it to is maybe you can't think of a specific instance where you kind of followed this path, but is there something that you may have noticed before and were able to make changes? I always like to acknowledge if you've already been in this situation before, this is an opportunity to celebrate that. But then, as always, please be gentle with this prompt because we don't want you to recreate the stress or anxiety. I also come from a, risk assessment background. So it's like, we don't need to talk about how we got here and what caused your stress or anxiety episode or incident. We want to kind of move past that. And how did you kind of come back for it? What did you notice? How you were feeling and how did you kind of right the ship, so to speak? Because we don't want you to go back into that kind of anxious inducing or stress inducing scenario that kind of triggered it in the first place. The my example is the one on the right. I've been leaning into the stickers very much so. I think now going on like the last year because I love this particular style for the mind map and it really suits me. I talked about the anxiety and stress that I get. I'm not one of those people that feels it at work because I like to keep pretty even keel and I can compartmentalize pretty well. But I know I'm stressed at work when I have those work stress dreams. My dream is a very safe space, usually. I have all the wonderful dreams, the fantasies, all those great things, but it's never entirely grounded in reality until I know I'm stressed and I start dreaming those work scenarios to the point I wake up stressed. I wake up frazzled because I was like, did this actually happen? Did I make this mistake? Did someone make this mistake? Or is this me just trying to process the either conversation or the phone call that I have to have later that day? And it just becomes this very weird and awkward deja vu to the point I would have conversations with people and then I would look to them and could not understand why they didn't understand what we were talking about because in my mind we had had that conversation. So there was so much of the back and forth and so it would just really start to creep in and I would just wake up already, mentally fatigued. The decision making fatigue was already suffering just because I wasn't addressing probably the stress or didn't really maybe know it was the stress that it was causing until the dream world entered and was like, you need to fix it. So we are going to take some time to work on this mind map. And again, we're answering kind of the ideas of when was the last time you felt this? Was it those type of emotions and physical sensations? And how can you care for yourself moving forward, kind of acknowledging those situational awareness pieces. So we will see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Just reading the chat. I appreciate everyone's honesty and vulnerability in admitting this. I found this a little bit more challenging just to admit that I get stressed out or anxious sometimes because I've just been in very kind of high octane positions, I feel like sometimes. And so to kind of admit what stresses you out, what causes you anxiety, and how to fix it I find really probably unnecessarily vulnerable just because I feel like it was almost something that was someone was going to use against me in almost like a personal or professional environment. In conversations and they see you starting to get heated, it's like, do you need to take a break? It's like, do not patronize me. But it became one of those things that I just surprisingly found that a lot harder just to share. So the fact that all of you are trying this and putting out there kind of the definitions of how you feel about it, taking some of those squishier, kind of hard to place, hard to define things and adding words to it, I think is really amazing, really powerful. And sometimes that's the best kind of start of research that we can get so that we can start adjusting some of those variables to make some of the changes or at least acknowledge, like, I know I'm already starting to respond to this in this type of way and so maybe it's a kind of keep going to address it, or maybe it's I think we need to take a break. I think we need to walk away because I know we have a lot of folks that are in kind of health work, healthcare, but also education. And a lot of those also just dealing with people on a regular basis in those kind of people forward positions. And that can be a lot of stress and anxiety that you don't cause and that it just gets brought on you. And so being able to kind of identify these tools or work through some of these things or acknowledge like I don't know how to do this, but I at least know that this is where I need to start and just start practicing all those things because you guys had amazing things from everything from sound baths to dancing to moving your body because you feel tense. Maybe it is a hot shower, a hot bath. Maybe it is diving into those hobbies. Maybe it is taking a break and just reading for a little bit, listening to a podcast, watching those feel good comfort shows, a new playlist, all of those things. So thank you everybody for sharing. Like I said, to me, it just seems honestly a little bit on the vulnerable side, but you guys provide such great support. And I think what's also really nice and magical is that being able to just acknowledge that it's like, I see what you're going through, and we want us all to kind of work together. So you guys are amazing. So thank you for working on that and thank you for sharing. And maybe if you didn't quite get the inspiration, but maybe it tweaked some interest, you do have the opportunity to kind of explore this thought or this kind of layer of the theme throughout the week. So I think that's really great. So now we're going to turn to page 36 in your April journal for our rosebud thorn reflection, just kind of knocking out all the reflecting early on in the journal so that we can kind of get in our feels, start from scratch and then build ourselves up as we go. But I love and appreciate the rosebud thorn exercise because I think it is a really great way to highlight those highs, lows, and everything in between that you had for this week, but in almost like a sheltered setting. So you can give it whatever power, energy, or effort that you want, but you at the end of the day get to decide, am I going to take this with me into the next week, or am I just going to acknowledge it now and leave it in the in the previous week? And so the rose is a highlight, something that made you smile, that made you happy. It was that high. It was something that went well. I thoroughly enjoyed watching the Artemis 2 landing. I got to watch it with my 5-year-old nephew. And I thought what was really interesting about it is I also sat and watched it with my parents. And it was interesting to just see the different generations responding to this because my 5-year-old nephew asked all the questions, was awe-inspired, thought it was the coolest thing ever. And unfortunately, my poor mother is looking at it kind of through her fingers because she remembers the previous attempts, the Challenger cross. So even she was like, "Are we sure we should be watching this right now? Can we just like record it and maybe watch it later?" She came from that dynamic. And so it was really interesting watching it with both of them. And then I was seeing it from a military operational perspective because I had been on these type of ships before. I knew a handful of people that were out there. So it was just all of these really interesting perspectives And we were all kind of talking about it, and I just thought it was really cool. And then if you've ever been to Scotland, which is where I came from, they have this amazing like marshmallow moon pie candy that looks like the parachutes. So even Scotland was chiming in that the Chinooks brought the Artemis back because it looks like their chocolate candy. So I just thought it was a really fun experience to enjoy and see how all of those different things worked. So the bud is something that you're looking forward to, something that is maybe out on the horizon that even you're trying to maybe pick up on some of those situational awareness cues for, is it going to turn into a rose or could it potentially take a little bit of a turn in the thorn category? And so for me, when I was living in California, I was a big Club Pilates fan. I loved the program, the system, all of those things. And it turns out there was one very close to my parents' house here in Oklahoma, so I started that up again. And so I'm really excited. I have a couple more scheduled. So it's nice to get back into that style of routine because the Pilates over in the UK was more the mat Pilates, which isn't my thing. So I love it. It makes me happy and it gives me up in the morning. And so I've enjoyed it, but it also leads to my thorn. And so that thorn is going to be the challenge, something that maybe didn't go as well, something unexpected, something that was a roadblock, or even as I have reframed it because I don't like to dwell too much on the negative, but something that is just taking up too much time, energy, effort on you. Um, with the start of Pilates, obviously comes soreness. And so I love it. But at the same time, you move just a little bit and you're like, I haven't felt that muscle in a hot minute. So it was able to like, I took my parents' little back scratcher and was able to pinpoint and be like, I am sore here, I am sore here, and I am sore here. Thank you for my TED Talk. But it's also really exciting, and I always appreciate when the rosebud thorns can kind of overlap like that. But as always, we are on page 36 for that rosebud thorn reflection. We love to celebrate all of those roses with each and every one of you, but also get excited for some of those buds and acknowledge some of those thorns just with extra thoughts, strength, and prayers. So if you would like to share, we would love to see that in the chat, but we will see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. What I do think is magical about attending the socials and sharing those rosebud thorns is it's such a lovely snapshot into everybody's lives. And I think that's just kind of the epitome of the concept of Sonder and the Silken Sonder is that everyone is living these amazingly vivid lives. Even if you don't see your life as amazingly vivid, it is. So just being able to sit here and read how everybody is going in that kind of moment, I really always appreciate it because you can see like, oh, I get it. I've been there, or I can relate in this scenario, or ooh, I hope they get better. I hope you feel better. I hope those things happen. And I love seeing all of the amazing things that you go see, the concerts, but also just even the perspectives of how everybody kind of answers this question. I just think it's a really great exercise. And I do think it's another one of those that can maybe help reduce stress and anxiety a little bit, especially if you feel like it's a control thing, if things are a little bit out of control. Just because, like I said, you're able to put each of these things kind of under a microscope, take a look at it, and then, either dispose of it or move on for deeper discovery, if you will. So now we're going to move on to those weekly planner pages. So this is going to be page 40 and 41 in your April journal. And don't worry, we will continue to kind of cue those different sections as we go, just so you don't get lost. But just because this is the structure that we're following, as we said, this is your time to set up your journal. So feel free to jump around and bounce around to the different sections as we go, or even work on something completely different. But the way I always like to frame how I approach the weekly planner pages is I like to ask myself, what do I need this week? And if you come to my socials before, you know that I use this a lot. It is, what do you need this week? Because sometimes what you need this week is exactly as written. Sometimes what you need this week is a complete revamp, a complete repurpose, a complete redesign of these sections. And sometimes what also you need is a break. I have definitely been a little overwhelmed or having just like super busy. And so to add more kind of tracker, those type of things, I will strip it away to the bare minimum because we know that this week in April looks very different than the week in January that we had, and will definitely look different than a week in August or even a week in October. So that is why I always ask myself, what do I need this week? What do I want from this week? You can even kind of do that as well. But I've just found that really helpful because even future me will look at what I did today on like a Wednesday and Thursday and be like, what were you thinking? And so it's like, I don't need that right now. I need to rip this page out and start all over, or I need to do something different. Or maybe I didn't quite get to everything that I wanted to do from the week before. So being able to start over each week anew, I think is great because then you can keep adjusting with what do you need. And I have found that that matches my expectations a little bit better. And I just become a little bit more satisfied with the pages, regardless of how much white space is still showing or how much white space has been used. So we're going to start at the top of page 40 with this week I want to feel. And I like to spin this a little bit to how do I want to feel this time next week? I'm goal oriented and I have found it helpful as kind of restructuring my week, especially as I'm experiencing those rose, buds, and thorns. So those highs, lows, and everything in between of the week. If I can kind of frame this of, well, this is my end goal. This is how I want to feel. This is what I want to have accomplished by the end of the week. This is how I make it helpful. But at the same time, you can also include this week I want to feel, and that can be 1% better, 5% happier, 2% more hydrated. Maybe it is less of something, more of something. Maybe it is leaning into the theme of I want to be a little bit more awake instead aware instead of just awake. Maybe it's leaning into some of that situational awareness. Maybe it is your word of the year. Maybe it's a word of the month. Maybe it's the same word that you had last week. And then, as I always say, pictures are worth 1,000 words. So maybe you want to do a doodle or a sticker or something motivating in that way. And if you have if it's a little tricky to kind of find out how you want to feel, I know Bailey, one of our other facilitators, will kind of do the whole setup and use this then as a summary of how she thinks the week is potentially going to go or how she thinks she's going to feel kind of based on all those things. So I'm going to play a really quick song, but if you want to share this week, you want to feel, we'll see you soon. So now that we have this week, I want to feel, or how I want to feel this time next week, we can then build some of those supporting components to help you with that. And those kind of can take the two different forms of the weekly major three goals and the weekly to-dos. And even as I move forward in these slides and the social, please feel free to continue to share in the chat, even previous prompts, previous thoughts. And if I need to go back to a slide, let me know when I go off camera, because again, we want to make sure that you are able to cover everything that you want from this. And so I like to combine these two sections because I think in terms of the three goals that I want to have for the week tend to be the mental and emotional reminders that I need to give myself to make it through the week. And that's everything from excuse myself from the unimportant. Hydration tends to be get enough rest are kind of my key ones now. And so just because, again, we like the idea of categories. So I feel like that's just a good way to sort some things. So I think that's always a really fun thing. And so we see a lot of ones that have a mind goal, a body goal, a soul goal, a mind goal, a health goal, or a family goal, a work, a self, and a family goal, kind of in those capacities. And I also, again, you'll see the alliterations pop up. I love that factor. So the bottom right one, revisit, restore, and relax. So that's kind of, again, those fun alliterations to maybe add a little bit more excitement into those kind of mundane things. Or maybe it's a little bit more of the overarching ideas, choosing novelty, releasing stagnation, activate learning or cultivating learning, or maybe it is just the three things that you need to get done. I always feel like taxes make a pretty good appearance this time of year. Wonder why. So sometimes it is just the three big things that need to get done, or the three things that are maybe causing that added extra stress or anxiety. And just because it is three does not mean you need to have three. Maybe you want to lean into the four C's, which is create, consume, cavort, and commune. So that is a you goal, an others goal, a move goal, and a social goal. And then the reason I like to combine these two sections is the example in the bottom left, I think is a perfect one for that. And that's where you have the different categories that are supporting how they want to feel, directly linked to the to-dos that are going to help support those categories in a really fun gamification, which we do love. If you've been with Silk and Sonder with any amount of time, you know that we love our bingo boards. And so maybe it is completely switching the two sections as well, just because the format works better. Maybe it is just two goals, a home goal and a work goal, or even just a prioritization, or what do you need to accomplish in those two categories that will help you feel the way you want to feel this time next week, or supporting how you want to feel. The top left one is maybe you want to lean a little bit more into those affirmations, the mantras, or even the quotes, because maybe that is what you need to support your how you want to feel this time next week, as well as your to-dos. So I think that's also another great approach. And then if we move into those weekly to-dos, these can be a traditional to-do list, or maybe you want to take it into the to-do list. Either way, if it's a to-do list or a to-do list, everything is to done. It's just whether or not you celebrate it along the way. I also found the Eisenhower matrix quite helpful. I am currently staying with my parents right now, so I got excited that I was going to be able to delegate some of the things that I couldn't accomplish in a day to my parents. But I then realized that the Eisenhower matrix can work both ways. So not only do I decide, delegate, and delay some of the things that I want to do, but I am now an official delegation for my parents' Eisenhower matrix, which is fine. And we love it, but I didn't think that the delegation was going to be a two-way street, and that somehow secretly they had been using the Eisenhower matrix all along. But I have found that tool really helpful, and it is really nice to kind of accomplish and tackle those tasks together. Maybe you need a little bit extra kind of support in the getting those to-dos accomplished. I think the Pomodoro technique is a great way for that, because that's where you pick the task, you set the timer, you work on it, and then you take a break. It's adds a little bit more structure. And sometimes that's certainly what I need when I'm a little bit more scattered, a little bit more stressed, or just really busy. So I appreciate being able to jump around for these different techniques in order to accomplish my to-do list. So my to-do list section tends to change more frequently than, say, my weekly three goals approach, just because I do like to keep those as those kind of squishier reminders for how I'm going to get through my week. But again, maybe it is just a recategorization or a reprioritization of the to-dos into a needs and a wants, especially if you take that moment to ask, what do you need this week? And even you can ask yourself, what do you want this week? So it's the same thing with looking at those to-dos the same way. Maybe you're trying to not do some things. So it's don't do this instead. Or maybe it's more of the to be's. So leaning into those weekly to be's or those weekly wins or the roses, or even just a little bit more on the week. The work and personal to-dos under the needs and wants categories. So a lot of times, if you just kind of reshuffle your to-do list, you can come up with a couple different ideas. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to play some music and we will see you soon. So now that we have structured our week, so to speak, with those to-dos, those goals, and how we want to feel, we have maybe one more component that we want to overlay, and that's our habits and activities. But when I talk about what do I need from the week, sometimes I don't need this section nearly as much as the other ones. And that is because I do go hand in hand with my weekly habits and activity tracker, as well as my monthly habit activity tracker. So my monthly habit tracker are things that I want to do every single day, but I will bring those things that I want to do. Usually it's three. I'm a creature of habit, so I want to move, I want to read, and I want to journal every day. I may throw in a fourth one to liven it up a bit, but usually I don't. Usually it's those three. And so those are the three things that I want to do every single day. I will bring them into my weekly habit and activity tracker and add the lens of reality. And part of that is adding the Lindsay reality. It is going to be how much time can I dedicate to these three things in a day? How often will I be able to do it? And that's based on weather, work schedule, workload, whatever other hobbies and activities I have scheduled. So sometimes that's going to look a little bit different. And I will say something that I'm having a tricky time transitioning from is, as I mentioned, I previously wasn't driving a car when I was living overseas. I was walking everywhere. And so that meant that if I was too busy, I would always be able to incorporate move just running my day-to-day errands. Well, not the case here. So I'm having to make a little bit more of an intentional effort to incorporate some of the movement, which I'm finding a little bit easier, but it's still that weird shift of, okay, what am I going to do? So obviously the Pilates has helped because that's an hour dedication to moving, but I've just found it a little trickier sometimes where it's like you now have to make that conscious effort to do that. So what was a little bit autopilot, which was really nice, become less of an autopilot. So I definitely have kind of come back to this to sort out how much can I realistically do in a day. And sometimes the approach to that can be the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 kind of category and goal setting, but don't always have to set a goal. I find that a little bit more intimidating because at the same time, I used to do that. And then I realized that so much of my time was not dictated by me. And so I would get frustrated not being able to accomplish those things when I just could not set a goal. But maybe this is where some of those mental and emotional reminders are. Maybe this is where the stickers live, because I did find that this was the first section to kind of go if I was on vacation or if I had friends and family visiting, because so much of those things are already incorporated. And I wanted to just be a little bit more present. But what I appreciate from this is that maybe your weekdays look a little bit different than your weekends. And again, just because there are 5 lines does not mean they all need to be used. Like you said, I am pretty dead set on 3 habits and activities on a pretty regular basis, unless I'm kind of adding in a new routine or a new element of a routine. But sometimes it's very specific. Sometimes it's a little bit more broad, like the one in the middle and the bottom, do something for me. Being able to give yourself that flexibility, I think, is really great. And I know some people will kind of run into situations where they have a harder time working on their journal, or they maybe fell off the journaling routine a little bit, and that's okay. So you can kind of always come back to that and help yourself with your journal by writing down some of the habits and activities for that. You all know I love my iconography. So I love incorporating some of these things. I think they're really great and they're really fun. And I also like to highlight the produce that are kind of out in there. I always like to do something fun, something different with those, but it's always fun to see the transition. And then same thing with leaning into the bucket list and adventure list. I repurpose my expense tracker for that purpose. So let us know what habits and activities you are working on, and we'll see you soon. Where does the time go? So now we're going to flip over to that second page, page 41 in your April journal. And this is a page that I feel like gets repurposed a lot. I lovingly refer to it as the B side. So this is certainly not one that I use all the time, but I feel like it has some great templates. So I'm going to go all through these slides a little quickly, but then I'll turn some music back on. So let me know if I need to go back to a different slide. But we have the meal plan, and that can be used exactly as listed with the planning of the meals, or maybe it's something that you want to do more of a meal tracker, kind of something done a little bit more real time. Maybe it's more of a meal plan for the soul, so leaning into those journal prompts or giving yourself that mental break to do some daily doodles. Great place for the Silk and Sonder affirmations that are in the app, but maybe this is where you want to highlight those daily priorities. I love it as a clothing or wardrobe tracker. I use it when I would work from home and I had a bunch of different client meetings. I would make sure that I was dressed appropriately. And same thing with, I use this to pack because I used to be someone that brought an excessive amount of shoes on vacation, but now I'm down to a solid and confident 2 shoes I can get away with. So I appreciate it for that. The mind body health plan is something else that you can plan for, or it is something that you can track in real time. So I always appreciate that. Maybe it's leaning into some of those alliterations to help. Maybe it's leaning into the day of the week. I like the simple elegance of the I feel this, therefore I need this. I think that's such a really powerful mental check-in tool that you can have various days during the week. Maybe it's just acknowledging your rose of the day or the highlight. Maybe this is where you want your bucket list of fun things to do. Maybe it's leaning into the 7 types of rest, or even just the things you want to accomplish, or the journal prompts live here. I like these gentle reminders. If you have not curated your social media to just be positive, and so those type of things, I highly recommend taking the time to do so. That is where I get so many of the memes as well as the iconography that I love. So I highly recommend that. And then the shopping list is the very last one, and that can go hand in hand with the meal plan, or it can be a place for those themed bingo boards, the reminders to take breaks, your social check-ins. Maybe this is where the mental and emotional reminders are for the week, or even just kind of what are you thinking, what are you feeling? So I'm going to go back to the beginning, play a very brief song, and then we will close out this social. See you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. And then that very last section on page 41 is the I am loving. I am loving the sassy sense of humor that I feel like you can find in some components of social media. So that's what I always appreciate. But this is your opportunity if you want to share what you are currently loving this week. And then I highly recommend if you have not tackled the page 39, the currently page. I love this. I'm an avid reader. So I love the idea that we get 3 lines for the entire month. So I turn this into, I do a check-in on the currently page at the beginning of the month, mid-month, and then at the end of the month, so I can tell a really fun story of what my April looked like. And I always appreciate it because I feel like these are really fun questions that you just don't get asked a lot. It's like, what's your third favorite dinosaur, or your favorite color, that people don't ask you as an adult. So I love this because then I get to talk about all those fun things that I'm currently thinking and feeling. And then, with that being said, we have reached the end. I apologize that the last one was a little bit rushed, but we would love to continue the conversation in the Silk and Sonder app. If you would like to share your pages there, we know they will provide amazing inspiration for the fellow Sonder fan, as well as use those in the socials. Jen is also putting a handful of links in the chat because we do have our spring clean reset that's going to be hosted by Jen O on April 21st. That's the exclusive, so there is a fee to that, but if you want to sign up and attend, please do so. If you can't make it, don't worry, and you've already paid for it, you will still get the link. And then we do have this option for a minimalist digital journal if that is something you or a friend or a family member want to try. You can add certainly some really great customizations through some of the digital components there to make it truly unique. And then this is a copy of my playlist. Don't worry, I will include a link in the chat so you can revisit some of these songs. I feel like I love finding the school safe millennial tracks that I grew up with. But thank you, everybody, for attending. I have had a great time, but I know you guys are having an amazing rest of your day. Have an amazing rest of your week, and we hope to see you at a future event real soon. Bye.